with a whole lot of truth. Remedy Revolution is here for you. Ooh. And now here's your host, Erin Page.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Remedy Revolution podcast. My name is Erin, and today's guest is somebody that I'm actually really interested to speak with. He's done some really groundbreaking research on glucose and its effect directly on the brain. He is a trained neuropsychologist, but he's currently practicing as a neuroscientist and brain rehab specialist, which is very interesting because we all need and utilize our brains, right? So I am very pleased to announce my guest today, Dr. David Stevens.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for being here.
Happy to be.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about your story. How did you get involved with glucose and its effects on the brain? And then I want to hear a little bit more deeply as far as what it's doing for some of your patients.
Okay, and I'll give you the short version of how I got involved with glucose. I was in 2017 practicing neuropsychology and had started doing what are called baseline assessments for kids before participating in sports. I live in Colorado, and there was a Colorado law passed in 2013 that every kid that wanted to play club sports or participate in sports in schools had to have a pre-participation cognitive screening. So I was doing those screenings and found that a high percentage of kids, even though the parents said they'd never had a head injury, never had a concussion, never had a fall, none of those things, probably 75% or more of kids were getting test results that were consistent with multiple head injuries and significant cognitive dysfunction. And so I thought that was curious. So I started researching initially with concussions specifically, but what was happening from the moment of impact to the head. And in the process of doing that research, and I'll preface this with I'm a person of faith, but as I was doing the research, I was awakened in the middle of the night, literally in October of 2017, but not with an audible voice, but just the very clear inspiration or message, try glucose. And I thought that was a very weird thing to wake up with. And so I wasn't just going to rush out and buy glucose. I didn't even know where to buy glucose at that point in time. And start recommending that people take it. So I did the research on glucose, found out contrary to much popular information that glucose cannot be harmful to the human body in any amount. And so once I discovered that through my research, then had a new guy coming in, 41-year-old guy. I was doing neuropsych testing with him. And there was a particular test that he had to look at a key on a sheet of paper and then match numbers with symbols. And when I put it in front of him, he literally started weeping. And when he composed himself, he said, I can't make any sense of that at all. He said, it looks like somebody took a box of jigsaw puzzle pieces and turned it upside down, and I just can't decipher it at all.
Sure.
So he pulled himself together. We finished the testing, and I had purchased a little 10-tablet vial of glucose tablets from the drugstore. I think it was Walgreens, not that that matters. But I said to him, put on my best salesman's hat, and I said to him, I have no idea if this will help. What I know for sure is it won't hurt you. Would you like to try? And for some reason, he said yes. And so I gave him 4 or 5 glucose tablets. And probably 15, 20 seconds after he finished taking them, he turned to his wife and said, you know that pressure that's always in my head? And she said, yeah. And he said, it's gone. And I think all of our jaws almost hit the floor.
Sure.
Because I certainly wasn't expecting that. So he continued to take glucose, and after 6 months, we did follow-up. I did follow-up neuropsych testing with him with a different version of the same test. So it wasn't just that he knew the test and did better, but he improved by 3 standard deviations.
Wow.
And just for context, without going into the weeds of statistics, but you need a quarter of 1 standard deviation to be what's called statistically significant, meaning that the results did not happen by chance. And so his result was 7 times that.
Right.
Which is an astounding number.
Okay, so let's kind of rewind a little bit here. So sugar obviously gets a very bad rap, and for by and large for a lot of reasons. But so what is the differentiation? What is glucose versus, say, eating 10 donuts?
Great question. So glucose is a type of sugar. It's what's called a monosaccharide. What's in 10 donuts, or each donut, is sucrose, which is a di or polysaccharide. And really all that means is the chemical weight of the sugar. And so glucose, again, without going too much into the chemistry weeds, but glucose, the entire makeup is 6 atoms of carbon, 12 atoms of hydrogen, or essentially water, and 6 atoms of oxygen. And that's all there is in glucose. There's nothing else. It's not corrosive. It's not acidic. It's not alkaline. All of those things are absolutely necessary to human survival. And that is what glucose consists of. And so it's chemically light enough to get past what's called the blood-brain barrier.
Right.
So it can get directly to your brain to provide fuel for your brain. And sucrose, which is in most desserts and candy and all of that, is chemically twice as heavy as glucose. It's 12 atoms of carbon, 22 atoms of hydrogen, and 12 atoms of oxygen.
Okay, so you mentioned that it does cross the blood-brain barrier. What is the mechanism of action then with glucose? What is it doing in the brain that allows us to have symptom resolution, or clearing the brain fog, or whatever it might be?
Yeah, and really, the mechanism is simply that our bodies must have those essential fuels. Now, one of the things I've started talking about is, and calling what I'm doing, restoration science. And there are 3 primary fuels that every plant, animal, and human must have, which is water, oxygen, and glucose. And glucose is, like I said a minute ago, includes carbon, but also is significantly hydrogen or water and oxygen. And so it is providing those necessary fuels that the brain needs and the body needs. Both need glucose to survive. We have to have enough carbon, enough hydrogen, enough oxygen. And that makes cellular reactions happen. Glucose results or is necessary for the creation of neurotransmitters, which are the chemical messengers in the brain. It's really required for every human function.
So, what are we talking about when if somebody were to want to attempt this? What kinds of symptoms would somebody present to you with that would make you think they were a good candidate for trying glucose?
We probably don't have time to go over that list. Essentially, any symptom apart from what I call mechanical problems, like if you break your arm, taking glucose isn't going to reset your arm. It probably will facilitate the healing process, but you need to go get an x-ray and a cast and all of that. If you have a cut, really of any kind, again, glucose can speed up the healing process, but it's not a substitute for sutures or stitches, not a substitute for a Band-Aid. It's not directly a substitute for an infection, although it does strengthen and improve the functioning of the immune system. But if you have a cold or something, bronchitis, pneumonia, penicillin or some kind of antibiotic is going to be better for you, obviously, than glucose in that moment directly.
Mm-hmm.
But apart from that, really anything brain related, memory problems, brain fog, difficulty with language, like thinking of words, attention, concentration, then the whole gamut of emotions, and even physical difficulties.
So what, if you will, is the most miraculous story that you've really seen and experienced with glucose?
The most, probably the most dramatic is, I don't know if you know what CTE is.
Is it a type of traumatic brain injury?
Yes. Stands for chronic traumatic encephalopathy,
Mm-hmm.
and results in the buildup of what's called tau protein in the brain,
Okay.
which also happens with Alzheimer's and other dementias.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked with this guy a number of years ago, but he estimated that he'd had 50 or more concussions as a kid. Then in his early 20s, he was in a car accident. He went headfirst through the windshield at 120 miles an hour and was in a medically induced coma for 30 days. Then he went to prison because he was drunk and he caused the terrible accident and got assaulted and had some more concussive and traumatic injuries. And so when he came to me, he was a bright guy, loved to read. He told me, if I work as hard as I can maybe read 75 pages a week. And then he said, I literally think of suicide every minute of every day. And he said, it takes every ounce of willpower I have to not fight every person I see. And so after 6 months of taking glucose, he was reading 750 pages a week. He had zero suicidal ideation. He had zero anger, was fully functional, was able to go back to work, was able to really resume his life.
Mm-hmm. So, many of my listeners are in the world of PANS and PANDAS, which is a neuropsychiatric disorder associated with brain inflammation from various infections. And so when we're looking at something like that, clearly, I think, addressing the numerous infections is imperative as well, as you mentioned before. But when we're talking about the remaining behaviors, because a lot of these kids do start to heal physically, but we still see a lot of remaining neural pathways that have now been kind of created after prolonged illness, which I think is probably closer to like a PTSD kind of a response. So what are you seeing for people like that have had prolonged trauma, whether it's physical from chronic illness or, versus the more traumatic brain injury kind of mechanisms?
Yes. So whether it's, and I've worked with probably 150, 200 combat veterans.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's that kind of trauma,
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with, I don't know what the number is, a significant number of people that have had either physical or sexual or emotional abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were talking before coming on about societal trauma, like from COVID and those kinds of things. But every person that I've worked with that has completed the treatment has had all of the symptoms associated with the trauma go away.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting and important to talk about, like with an infectious process or toxins, getting rid of them. And often that takes, excuse me, some kind of medicine, some kind of intervention. But getting rid of them, then when the brain is fueled, then they're not susceptible to coming back. And the brain regulates and manages the immune system, the cardiovascular system, really every system in the body. We talk about it, and if you ask somebody on the street, does the brain control the body? I think most people would say yes, but very few people think about the extent to which that's true. The brain literally controls every single bodily process.
Right.
And so ultimately, the brain is what results in what I call restoration. There are conditions that need treatment being addressed through other means, what I call micro interventions.
Okay.
And then glucose or dextrose is the macro intervention that then enables a person just to continue to function at full effectiveness and efficiency, both their brain and their body.
Have you ever found any contraindications then for using glucose?
There's a contraindication for people that have a corn allergy, that glucose and dextrose are produced from corn. But the good news is you can take tapioca dextrose, and that eliminates the problem of any kind of corn allergy. But apart from that, there isn't anything that contraindicates taking glucose, and I have yet to run across the condition for which it won't work.
And what about those that are concerned with taking in massive amounts of sugar, either because of being currently overweight or having symptoms of diabetes? Because I know that's a concern for a lot of people.
So it's interesting and exactly opposite of what you would expect and what you hear, that the brain glucose system and the body and blood glucose systems are separate. There's significant, even huge overlap, but they're not the same thing. And when brain glucose is low, that's when blood glucose is higher. And so I've treated hundreds of people with type 1 or type 2 diabetes, and every single one of them, as they take glucose, their blood sugar goes back down to normal. And that includes probably the most dramatic example. I'm working with a woman who was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when she was 1 and was given an insulin pump, I think, at age 5. And she's 39 years old now and doesn't use her insulin pump anymore, hardly uses insulin at all. It has taken and is taking glucose, and her blood sugars are stable.
I mean, to me, that would indicate that there's something that doesn't allow for the processing of glucose in the brain. And so then we have a buildup of glucose in the blood. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's very accurate, actually. I can go into a little more detail.
Sure.
That when there's a sympathetic nervous system or fight or flight or freeze system activation, that results in the brain opening the blood-brain barrier. There are cells in the capillaries in the brain called pericytes, and they regulate the permeability of the blood-brain barrier. When a sympathetic nervous system activation happens, that allows the pericytes allow glucose to come in faster because the brain needs as much glucose as it can get for you to fight if you need to, for you to run away if you need to protect yourself. But that greater openness or permeability of the blood-brain barrier only lasts about 20 minutes. If it continued to allow all the glucose possible, into the brain, then theoretically the brain could drain the body of glucose, and that would kill you. So obviously the brain can't allow that. So with each new sympathetic activation, that blood-brain barrier gets less and less permeable. Because the brain is trying to protect the body glucose supply.
Sure.
And so as it becomes less permeable, the brain has less glucose available. And so what it will do is activate the liver to release stored glucose. So it can get some, but it's still not getting all of that glucose because of the tighter blood-brain barrier. So glucose starts accumulating in the blood as the brain activates the liver to release stored glucose. The brain can't uptake all of that glucose. So it just, again, increases in the blood. As the brain gets more glucose, then it doesn't need to activate the liver to get more glucose. And so then with the liver not continuing to dump stored glucose into the blood, then the blood glucose level lowers.
So I presume that the goal is ultimately homeostasis, right? Because I don't think we want to keep eating glucose every day for the rest of our lives. We want that system to correct itself. So how long are you seeing on average does that take?
Well, and just to comment about that. So when I first started doing this, and I looked high and low and near and far, couldn't find anybody else doing it. And so pretty much I've been on my own in terms of developing it. But initially, and I think I mentioned the very first guy that took it, took him about 6 months for him to say, I have no symptoms.
Right.
And the follow-up testing, which was at the level we would expect given his intelligence. But in the last few years, I'd started recommending that people do take a maintenance dose pretty much forever. And the thinking behind that, or the rationale behind that, is if you're just doing we'll say an office job and not exercising a lot, your need for fluid is less. If you're running 5 miles a day, your fluid intake will be greater because you're losing fluid through sweating and other processes. And so nobody thinks anything about, well, if I'm exercising more, if I'm sweating more, I need to drink more fluid. The way our society is these days, the complexity, the stress, people are burning glucose faster than their diet can keep up with, even when there's no restriction on glucose getting to the brain past the blood-brain barrier. So continuing to take a significant amount less than they take when they're in the restoration process, but continuing to take it enables them to stay what I call fully fueled all the time. And so then they don't have any kind of symptom because their brain is just staying fueled continuously. But on average, and maybe a little more precise way to say it probably is that most commonly it takes about 6 months for people for their brain to be fully restored with glucose. And then they can go to a maintenance dose. And of course, a maintenance dose is up to the person. If they don't want to do it, then they don't need to do it. But I really haven't had anybody recently not want to do it because they feel so great and their function is so great. They want to continue to do it, and it's not difficult. And like I said at the beginning, glucose isn't harmful in any way. It's good for our bodies and our brain.
Sure. So when you talk about maintenance dose, let's talk about what is a recommended dose then to start with.
Of maintenance dose or
in general for restoration.
Yeah. So for kids that are 12, 14 or older, and then adults, the recommendation is to start with 3 tablespoons of dextrose 3 times a day. And 3 tablespoons is essentially 24 grams.
Okay.
So people can take glucose tablets. They can take glucose gummies.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of ironically enough, Smarties candy is pure dextrose.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet Tarts candy is pure dextrose.
Mm-hmm.
Starburst is pure dextrose. So some candies are pure dextrose, but
Mm-hmm.
most people prefer to take dextrose powder, mix it in some kind of liquid, then drink it.
Mm-hmm. And especially for those parents that want to utilize this for their kids, what kinds of things would you expect to see?
Really varies. The short answer, which I know may not be all that helpful, but the short answer is you can expect to see symptom elimination.
Mm-hmm.
So far, the youngest person I've treated is a 6-month-old baby,
Mm-hmm.
and she was in a car accident with her mother.
Mm-hmm.
Terrible timing. The mother had unlocked her car seat to adjust it right when there was impact with another car.
Mm.
And prior to that, she had been sleeping fine. She'd been eating fine. She was a quote unquote happy baby. And immediately after the accident, she became fussy. She became very finicky about eating. She wasn't sleeping well. And for her, probably 2 or 3 weeks later, all of that was gone and she was back to being her full functioning self.
Mm-hmm.
But really a wide range of symptoms, kind of like we talked about earlier,
Sure.
you can expect to go away.
Mm-hmm.
Sleep difficulties, irritability, anxiety, attention problems, physical problems.
I mean, anecdotally, I just got a message from a friend of mine, and she let me know that it's been helping tremendously with fatigue, brain fog, word finding, and general mood, for both herself, her husband, as well as her children. And so, I think it's very interesting to think that, we do look at overall the idea of sugar as like being evil and horrible, and we don't want to give that to our kids, especially because they become crazy and hyperactive and all of those things. But so I do find this so interesting, and it does require a little bit of a switch in the brain, if you will, because there's so much resistance.
Right.
And personally, so I started glucose after I heard you speak a few weeks ago, and actually you gave us a couple of Smarties, and it seemed to actually help a little bit. So I felt like, okay, well, I might as well just give this a try. And, but one of the things I'm struggling with personally is I don't like sweet things. So it's actually hard for me to intake that much dextrose. Any tips or pointers for especially people like me that aren't a big fan of things that are sweet?
Yes, you can mix it in just about anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so probably the most bitter or sour thing you can mix it in that I've heard anyway is apple cider vinegar. So some people will take it in that. A lot of people like taking it in tart cherry juice. Some people mix it with cranberry juice or grapefruit juice, but anything that's more bitter can be helpful. Even things like club soda can kind of help cut the sweetness.
Sure.
And what happens is that the sweetness doesn't continue to increase as you take more. There's kind of a topping out in terms of the sweet effect. And most people, even people that don't like sweets, they typically can find something, lemon juice or the other things I mentioned that cut the sweetness, but the effect is powerful enough that it's, well, I can tolerate it and it really isn't that big a deal.
Right. Right. Yeah. So, um, a lot of parents have spoken to me about particularly their children, but also themselves struggling with some really dark times, dark thoughts. And I had heard you mention something about having hope and making sure that, we are in that space from, a cognitive perspective as well. And I think that's super important, especially in the times that we're living in. There's so many very negative distractions. And so, um, in your view, how can glucose assist those people who find themselves in a very dark place of despair and help turn that around for them?
Great question. It's interesting, but my view is that the first glucose limitations happen for virtually everybody, even in utero.
Mm-hmm.
But if not, then certainly at the time of birth. And so what the brain does, the brain continuously scans inside itself, inside our bodies, outside our bodies, looking for threats and opportunities. And the brain, I always think it's kind of funny way to say it, but the brain knows that it must have glucose
Mm-hmm.
and that the body must have glucose. And so when it detects the glucose level in itself dropping, then that becomes a problem and is dangerous. And so the brain begins to, because it doesn't have any other explanation for what's happening, it interprets that as, well, there's something wrong with me. I'm somehow deficient. I'm somehow defective. And as the glucose level in the brain continues to decrease, those thoughts of there's something wrong with me, the darker thoughts, increase. And when people are having suicidal ideation, first and foremost, it means their brain glucose is quite low.
Mm-hmm.
And so very important to understand that it's the brain basically identifying lowering glucose and interpreting that as defect, as problem, as dangerous. But then it's also important for people to learn and to know that when their brain is fueled, they will function wholly and completely. And I would say God has designed us that way. Mm-hmm. Other people would say that's evolution that resulted in those adaptations. But regardless of your perspective, it's true that when your brain is fueled, you will fully function, and that the brain deals with toxins or deals with bacteria or deals with viruses, deals with every situation and regulates it. When the brain has enough fuel, it keeps everything regulated and in balance. Mm-hmm. So hope includes that when my brain is functioned, I will be fine. Mm-hmm. And that perception of deficit or defect goes away. Mm-hmm. And kind of interesting, the Greek word for hope is elpida. And it doesn't mean like we talk about in English, that it's something is a possibility, something good might happen. It really means that this event is certain, mm-hmm. or an outcome is certain without question. There's no doubt. Mm-hmm. And that applies to when, again, humans, plants, animals have the right amount of the primary fuels, water, oxygen, glucose, you will function fully, and you can have hope in that. and hope meaning certainty, not hope meaning, well, maybe so, maybe not.
Right. So I suppose the bigger question is, you know, because of your background, I'm curious, obviously so many of, particularly in the United States, so many people are led to believe that whatever is ailing them, it must be a chemical imbalance, that they have distorted thinking because of this chemical imbalance, because their neurotransmitters are off and all of these things. So I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on that, and have they changed from the beginning of your career until now?
Yes, completely changed. And really, understanding fueling is at the heart of that change.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I mentioned earlier, but neurotransmitters require glucose in order to be created.
Mm-hmm.
Every cell, the mitochondria in every cell, needs to have glucose to convert to energy. And so I make a distinction between, and I mentioned it earlier, but what I call micro and macro function.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can identify, and people have, of course, identified many micro problems, but haven't understood that the macro issue is underlying all of the observed micro problems.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it's particularly in the psychiatric world, it's thought, well, we need to get the right medication, and that's a very imprecise science.
Mm-hmm.
That people still don't, there's still not knowledge as to why what are called mood stabilizing medications reduce mania.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody can explain that.
Right.
Really, still nobody can explain completely what causes depression and why antidepressants work.
Mm-hmm.
The serotonin theory there's been some research that has basically said there's no connection between serotonin and depression.
Right.
But so when the brain is fueled, depression, mania, anxiety, whatever, all completely go away.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it makes sense. Let's deal with the macro problem. And when the macro problem is dealt with, then we're not just talking about recovery. We're not talking about maintenance. We're talking about complete restoration.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on dopamine hits, like social media and those kinds of things, and this idea that like we're creating a more depressive society because of repeated exposure to or production of dopamine? Is that accurate, or is it just that all of the glucose energy is going towards fueling the things that we are inputting into the brain?
I think, I think both are true.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we look at, again, a micro perspective, that dopamine production, dopamine release, all of those things require fuel to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so dopamine is clearly a neurotransmitter, plays a very important role in brain function. And so people, like I said, scientists, researchers, clinicians have identified that dopamine activity is associated with better function when there's sufficient dopamine.
Mm-hmm.
Lack of dopamine is connected to lower function.
Right.
But there isn't the recognition of the glucose factor. And probably as importantly, and this goes back to one of your earlier questions that I didn't answer, but that burning glucose is a huge factor as well.
Mm-hmm.
Being alive burns glucose.
Mm-hmm.
And then engaging in activity beyond just what's necessary to be alive burns more glucose. And so having to metabolize dopamine, or having to metabolize medications, or having to deal with temperature variations, anything that affects our body, we can look at a specific body part and see an effect. But that effect ultimately is because the brain hasn't had enough fuel to regulate it.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the glucose burning is also very relevant, going way back to when you asked about the blood sugar and diabetes and gaining weight.
Mm-hmm.
And so people that gain weight while they're taking glucose, and not everybody does, but that is most commonly associated with higher levels of glucose burning and things like histories of trauma or things like an underregulated whatever body system we want to talk about. And things as I think more of us understand the problem with screens, looking at screens, that burns glucose very fast because the visual system is among the most complex systems in the brain. But when a person is burning glucose at a high rate, then part of what the brain does is stores more glucose as fat so that there's basically a supply for a rainy day. The brain detects I'm burning it, we'll just pick a number, 3 times faster than what is necessary just for basic function. And so I need to protect myself. I need to protect the brain and the body by ensuring there's enough glucose for or to sustain this high burning. And essentially, fat is long-term stored glucose.
Well, okay, so that brings me to a personal story actually that I'm curious about. So, briefly, I have had a history of autoimmune kinds of issues as well as lots of infections with Lyme disease and et al., if you will. So I had gotten to a place of really complete remission where I was doing very well. And utilizing at that time intermittent fasting and primarily ketogenic or carnivore diet. And then after the first time I had COVID, I feel like there was a huge shift in my metabolism in general. I've since had COVID now 5 or 6 times, and can't seem to fully get back to it. But during those multiple infections, I gained weight, and that weight is completely stubborn. And I mean, clearly I know what I need to do, or what I did in the past. However, even if I return to everything exactly as I had done previously, nothing seems to work. So my theory at this point is that I've had a complete shift in my metabolic health, which has now perhaps kind of steered me in a different direction where I can't get myself into ketosis anymore and burn that. So I'm curious, is that a glucose issue from your purview?
It is. Yeah, I think several things are involved there. But so ketosis, you're probably aware, is basically a 3rd level fueling process.
Right.
It's a safety net. And ultimately, it is converting long-term stored glucose in the form of fat to more glucose. But the effect on your body from all the things you described certainly has made your body work harder and burn glucose faster. And again, when the brain is burning glucose faster, then the brain will selectively use some of the glucose specifically to go to fat storage. So you have reserves in case this this fast burning continues.
Right.
And if you're not getting enough fueling. And so it's not everybody gains weight that
Mhm.
that takes glucose like this,
Mhm.
but everybody, if they do gain weight, get to a plateau where
Mhm.
they stop gaining weight.
Mhm.
And then either when they go to the maintenance dose or sometimes even before then without doing anything different, they start losing weight
Mhm.
because the brain is no longer needing to keep putting away some of the ingested glucose as fat as a protective measure.
Mhm.
But it's also interesting that everyone, in my experience, that has low glucose, which is everyone, but part of that includes, and it can vary from mild occasional self-doubt to pervasive thoughts of utter worthlessness
Mhm.
and everything in between. But that perception of defect or deficit coming from low glucose is probably also one of the fastest glucose burning things, because the brain is always trying to either figure out what the problem is and also trying to mitigate it,
Mhm.
trying to either keep other people from seeing the perceived deficit,
Mhm.
trying to minimize it, trying to overcome it, trying to compensate. So that burns glucose very, very quickly. And even things like health problems, the brain can get to a point where it basically, and this, obviously this doesn't happen physically, but the brain kind of throws up its hands and just thinks, well, my reality is going to be continued compromise,
Mhm. Mhm.
continued inability to cope, continued deficit or defect. And so when the brain concludes that, then it is very frequently going to continue in that fat storage mode as a protective mechanism.
Mhm.
And then one of the things I talk about are glucose conservation modes. And so the brain conserves glucose, one, by using some of glucose intake for fat. It also conserves glucose by reducing activity, by sending pain signals,
Mhm.
fatigue. All those things are, at least in part, ways the brain adjusts to reduce glucose burning by reducing activity.
Mhm.
So it's kind of a long answer. I don't know if that made sense.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. So, um, utilizing glucose in situations like mine, what would you expect to see? Obviously, for my own sake, I would love to see weight loss, right? Because I'm hoping that, uh, you know, self-image and all of those things improve with all of that. But not only that, when I'm feeling better physically, obviously I'm feeling better mentally and emotionally as well. Um, and this is a two-part question, but secondarily, what kinds of things do you recommend in conjunction with glucose? Things like psychotherapy or meditation techniques or those kinds of things. Is that also of benefit when trying to correct the energy issue within the brain?
Yes. And I wouldn't say, certainly it's not traditional psychotherapy,
Mm-hmm.
but the way I talk about it is changing your brain's automated interpretations.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like we talked about a minute ago, beginning even pre-verbally, the brain interprets there's something wrong with me because I'm not keeping up with glucose,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a very dangerous thing. So it's a significant deficit or defect. And so it's a very important thing to identify there isn't anything wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't any defect in me in any way. The only problem is I'm low on glucose
Mm-hmm.
because of glucose limitation and burning it too quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And so getting that to automate, for the brain to recognize, hallelujah, the only problem is I haven't had enough glucose, and I now know I can get enough glucose. And so then what happens is, instead of interpreting something's wrong with me, I'm not good enough, I need other people's validation to assure me that I'm at least okay, the automation turns to, if I have a thought of self-doubt, it's immediately, that means I'm low on glucose.
Sure.
If I have brain fog, that means I'm low on glucose. I talk about existential fears that everybody has, the fear of worthlessness and the fear of death. When your brain is fueled, and when it, to your question, when the thought pattern has become automated, that there isn't any deficit or defect, there isn't any danger to me, then those existential fears go away. And that's really when any excess glucose burning has been eliminated.
Yeah, I mean, I think, traditional talk therapy, from my experience, a lot of times reiterates the patterns, because you're talking repeatedly about the events or the things that happen to me versus, okay, well, a more hopeful conversation, or a conversation about what I'm doing now or what I'm doing in the future. And so, I think often in a traditional talk therapy sense, we kind of get stuck in that pattern because we're literally repeating it over and over and over again. So for somebody who's looking to deal with the mental emotional piece of all of this, and the retraining of the synapses within the brain, so that then we don't repeat those patterns, who would they speak with, and what kinds of things might they do?
Yeah, probably obviously speaking with me, but I also am just finishing up training 3 people that they've done a year-long training with me. And so they're available. And I'm also getting ready to start doing a training for practitioners. So there is more availability.
Sure.
And my personal practice is that, in terms of working with people, that they pay whatever they can afford, literally. And so probably at any given time, 25% of the people I work with don't pay anything because they can't. And then my trainees have committed to that same thing. So, it could easily seem like, I think, well, my deal is just trying to bring in business and trying to get people to see me. Very important to me, really very much a mission for me, is seeing people restored. And so it's never, ever a money issue with me. It's always individually, whatever you tell me you can afford. If it's 0, it's 0. If it's 5, it's 5. So it isn't about money. And what I tell people too, and again, this same thing applies to the people that I've trained and am supervising.
Sure.
For me, my top fee is $175. And I tell people that fee, or the higher amounts, are for people that can afford it. So then they help support people that can't.
Sure.
So again, it's not a money-making enterprise, but it is a very important thing, even for just managing the glucose, because the brain does alternately fuel different things in the moment based on its perceived most important need. And so sometimes functions will get worse during the process intermittently. And to navigate that is really difficult on your own.
Yeah.
And I would say it's even harder. And your point about psychotherapy is a very good one. But the process that I do with people is of really basically reinforcing the truth about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
When their brain functions fully, they will function fully. And they need to understand, again, the truth that there's never been a deficit or a defect.
Mm-hmm.
You've never been a weak person, a bad person, any kind of person. Things that people kind of get caught up in with labels, things like learning disabilities or autism or perceived memory trouble or processing problem, whatever. Or I'm a depressed person, or I'm a person with schizophrenia. None of those things are true. Those are all fueling deficits that result in symptoms.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to get there on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's very honorable, and I hope some of the listeners will take you up on your offer, because I do think, all of us practitioners in the field really have a heart to help as much as we possibly can.
Yep.
All right. So, unfortunately, I wish I could sit here and talk forever, but I do. I do have to make sure that I keep some time here, but let's go ahead and I'm going to ask you our 8 rapid fire questions. I ask these of every single one of our guests. They're designed to just give us a little bit more insight into who you are and what makes you tick. So, number 1, if you could choose only one natural remedy for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Any guesses?
I mean, I think I know, but
Glucose / dextrose, and I didn't say it, but those are exactly the same thing, just different names.
Awesome. Number 2, tell us something most people don't know about you.
This is actually, it's a couple things, but it's how my kids used to introduce me when they were still at home. They said, first, our dad was in the state mental hospital. Then he went to prison, then he went to jail. And so, and I always had to tell people to clarify that was professionally,
right?
Not in terms of my own personal need.
Right.
So I do a lot of work with jails and prisons. And often I go to similar cities or go to cities multiple times working, consulting in jails and prisons. So I kind of like when I'm riding with an Uber driver to say, I don't think I've ever been in Tulsa when I wasn't in jail.
Yeah. Nice. All right. If I were to compile a playlist of happy music, what song would you suggest be added?
I think Perfectly Loved by Rachel Lampa.
I'll have to put that one on my playlist. All right. What is your favorite guilty pleasure?
I think without question, ice cream.
Any particular flavor?
I'm a pretty big fan of Chunky Monkey. And I never use Chunky Monkey, but just plain chocolate goes a long ways too.
Awesome. All right. What's the most influential book you've ever read?
I would say sort of the easy answer is the Bible. But apart from that, Les Miserables by Victor Hugo.
Very interesting. Yeah, very, very interesting book, and I love the musical myself.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And have you seen the films?
The most recent one I did see. Yeah.
I really like the 1998 one with Liam Neeson.
Yep, I've seen that. Yeah, really, very. I don't know, just the whole. Well, I mean, revolution, right? Is so. All right. What is the? Well, interestingly, the next question is, what does the word revolution mean to you?
Well, obviously, there's revolution in Les Miserables, political, social, cultural sense. But revolution also means completing a cycle or completing a turn. And so really for me, revolution probably most importantly means that we can go back to the beginning. There can be a reset. We can start over.
And what does the word remedy mean to you?
Something very similar. So again, remedy can mean like a medicine or something, but it can also mean adjusting or fixing a situation. And so I think those two words actually go very well together. And in my work in this context of people really can be fully restored and start over, go back to functioning fully as a human.
Absolutely. And lastly, if you could impart one piece of wisdom onto our listeners, what would that be?
One of the things that I very frequently say to people when I work with them is trust yourself. Trust that, one, you're not broken. You're not unacceptable. You've developed that perception from low glucose, from interacting with people who are, a term I often use is, injured themselves, and so aren't fully communicating your worthiness, your unconditional love to you. And so trusting yourself, again, you're not broken, you're not defective, you can be fully restored.
Awesome. So for those of you looking for more information about glucose and about Dr. David Stevens, he does have several books, one called Glucose 101, which is available on Amazon. He also has a new book coming out called Restored Hope, The New Restoration Science. And you can find him on the web at restoredhumanity.com. Thank you so much, Dr. David Stevens. It's been such a pleasure. I'm so glad we were able to connect, once again.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see y'all next time. Take care.
With hope as a guiding light, through darkest days we'll fight the night. With a whole lot of passion, with a whole lot of truth, Remedy Revolution is here for you.